And senior writer for the Dispatch, David Drucker. He is in Charleston, where Nikki Haley is holding a rally today to formally announce her presidential run. Also with us, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, live from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where former Vice President Mike Pence is expected to hold a rally today. And political reporter for Axios, Alexi McCammon, with us for the conversation as well. Good morning to you all. David, let me start with you in South Carolina, where Nikki Haley will make it official, or at least hold her first event as a presidential candidate. What is the feeling broadly in the Republican Party about where she fits, number one? And number two, what is her theory of the case? How does she handle the Donald Trump question? She was for him, she was against him, then she was for him, then she was against him.
Yeah, those are really big questions. And I think she's going to have to stake out her position on Donald Trump, the issues, and why she wants to be president. I think if she can do that, she gives herself a chance to be relevant in this race. She's probably the only woman in the race. On the Republican side, she is not white, and that's something we don't see that often, at least on the Republican side. And so I think for Nikki Haley, it's about answering the flip-flopping questions in relation to Trump and in relation to some issues, while also then just being very plain and authentic about what she's doing, why she's doing it, and where she stands. She tends to like this sort of bob and weave and issue what I like to say are bless your heart sort of swipes at her opponents, and those can work at times. But what Republican primary voters want to see, if she's going to have a chance to be competitive and have a chance to win, is they want to see a fighter. And the way you fight is by going after the front runner. A lot of Republicans have been hesitant to go after Donald Trump, who is the front runner for now. Let's see if she's willing to do it.
Yeah, that's the bob and weave that all these candidates are going to have to pull off. Part of her argument is implicit in a generational change, that she's a generation younger than Donald Trump and that she represents a fresh face, in her words anyway, in the Republican Party. But how does she handle the Donald Trump questions? As you say, if you want to win the primary, you need a bunch of his voters to do that. So they don't go with the full frontal attacks on Donald Trump. But how will she go at him over the course of this campaign?
Right. Look, I think that would be a mistake. I think the reason those voters are Trump voters is because he goes after everybody, no holds barred. And what we're seeing from him initially is, as you mentioned, mentioning that it's time for a new generation, mentioning that the Republican Party has lost the last 7 out of 8 national popular votes for president, and it's not a good look. And so her argument is essentially, if you want to win and therefore govern conservatively, we need to do something new. We need to do something fresh. I think she's going to lean into her criticism of Trump and other Republicans as time goes on. I think the key for her is to answer the questions about authenticity. You know, in years past and decades past, voters understood that you had to be one way with one audience, say another thing to another audience. It's just not something they have a lot of patience for anymore. So she is going to have to very quickly dispel questions about her authenticity. If she can do that, she's been a draw on the fundraising circuit for the past 2 years, despite some of her issues with Trump. And she's got a lot of innate political skill and charisma on the stump that you can't teach. And if she can handle her challenges, she can put some of that to good use.
So, Vaughn, it's Jonathan here. Another person who's got to navigate Donald Trump is Mike Pence, who served so loyally for him for 4 years up until the very end, up until January 6th. Pence has not declared his candidacy yet, but it's widely rumored. So tell us a little bit about the event that you're going to see from Pence today, but also this news that Pence is planning to defy a subpoena issued by the special counsel, Jack Smith, in the January 6th probe, arguing that he was technically part of the Senate that day, and we can get into the legalities of it or not. But the point being, he's still suggesting he doesn't want to go all in terms of turning on Trump.
Right. This is the hard part for the former vice president. He is now 756 days away from leaving Washington, D.C. and his partnership with Donald Trump. Yet, here comes the subpoena from the special counsel here, and yet he intends to fight it in the court. The challenge for him is that he is looking to fight this subpoena on the grounds of the speech and debate clause. the Constitution, which outlines that individuals, members of Congress, are protected. Yet, when he's arguing that he, on January 6th, was playing the role as the president of the Senate, it also runs counter to the argument that he was making ahead of discussion around the January 6th committee on Capitol Hill subpoenaing him, because at the time he was arguing as a member of the executive branch, he was protected from executive privilege from his conversations with Donald Trump from testifying. So ultimately, this battle would play out in the court system. And you said it, he's not an official candidate, but he's doing the candidate things. And here in Iowa today, 756 days after leaving Washington, D.C., he will be at this pizza ranch in Cedar Rapids where they are serving beer with the country's best chicken, and they're going to be serving up some Mike Pence here this afternoon. He's holding an event, though, specifically targeting a very much of a right-wing culture issue here, and that is transgender affirming care in schools. There is a federal district court in Minnesota that will be hearing a case based out of Cedar Rapids, the school district here, which last year provided a gender affirming plan for students if they so chose to seek one. That would allow individuals, children seventh grade and up, to go by the pronouns and the gender that they identify with without having to tell their parents if they so choose to. School administrators, faculty, and other students would have to address the students by their identified gender. And this led to a lawsuit from parents within this school district, and Mike Pence is here to support that lawsuit, saying that it is an issue of parental rights and the freedom of other students to address students by the gender in which they were born. He will be making his stop first in Minnesota, in St. Paul, where the federal district court, where that hearing will take place, before coming here to Cedar Rapids to address folks here in Iowa on the same day that Nikki Haley is in South Carolina.
It's going to be interesting watching Mike Pence and Ron DeSantis if he jumps into the race. Fighting it out over all of those cultural issues. You can never go wrong, of course, with beer and chicken. Alexi, let's talk about that announcement by Nikki Haley. I don't know what you thought of the video. We were having a discussion earlier on Morning Joe in one of the breaks about the heels moment. I found it kind of slightly cringy and awkward, but some people seem to have liked it. How does she navigate the whole Trump relationship? And if we assume that Trump is still the kind of litmus test in the Republican Party, is there space for somebody to kind of come down on both sides of Trump in the world of Republican politics at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, as just mentioned, she'll have to navigate the way she's talked about Trump in the past compared to what she's doing now. The fact of the matter is, though, when she was last asked by Craig and others on the Today Show, that was in October. And then Republicans saw in November, just a couple of weeks later, that Donald Trump is really killing their party's chances at taking power back, not just in Washington, but across the country as governors, as state legislators, as secretaries of state. And so for a lot of Republicans, Nikki Haley included, they're watching these facts. They're watching things like abortion continue to be an issue, while male Republicans struggle to even talk about the issue. And there is a lane, and I've even heard this from Democrats as recently as yesterday, for a Republican woman to try to really own that space as being a woman, but being an authoritative voice as a Republican woman on things like foreign policy, gender, things for parents and children, which of course Republicans are talking about this Parents' Bills of Rights, which is making decisions for parents. So she's trying to come at it as a more traditional way than we might have seen in the past. Certainly, Donald Trump will throw a wrench in those plans, but the very fascinating thing is, unlike Ron DeSantis, he's not given her a nickname. Right. He's telling her, you know, I wish you luck. That could change, of course, but it suggests that either he's not afraid of her politically, or he just doesn't want to unleash on her too soon because she is a woman and because he's known for attacking women.
Also excited about a large field that might split the vote and give him the nomination. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard live in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Senior writer for The Dispatch, David Drucker, reporting from Charleston, South Carolina, where Nikki Haley will hold that rally today. Guys, thank you both. We appreciate it.